Good day. Peer pressure is never a good thing. It makes us do things that we would not normally do. And usually it's counterproductive. Well, many of my contemporaries in the internet community like to use video recorders and use the genuine article. And as such, I have as well. Now, in all reality, many of my game reviews could have easily been done with emulation, giving me superior video quality, superior file size, by which I mean it's going to be far smaller, and really it would have just been far easier. Rather, I had to go and say, yes, I will use the genuine article, spend more time than necessary, and get subpar video quality. Although I must say it has improved. So from this day forward, I am renouncing my video recorder. It will only be used on consoles that I can't easily emulate. Now, the first game that is going to be reviewed under this doctrine is F-Zero, a game that if I actually did use the genuine article, I would probably still be recording video because the bloody thing is almost impossible to beat.
F-Zero was released in America in 1991 for the SNES. It was a launch title, but even though it was an early game in the Super Nintendo's lifespan, it's still able to compete with modern racing games.
Now as it stands, I'm not really a fan of racing games or racing in general.
At the end of it all, racing equates to driving around in a circle. That's it. That's all you do. I know it's more complicated than that, but still, as a viewer, that is all I am seeing. Just cars driving around in a circle. I have heard the prevailing argument that witnessing crashes is supposed to be exciting, or something. The only problem is the fact that it's real life, and there are real race car drivers that can really get killed. As for racing games, the problem remains the same. You're just driving around in a circle. I know it takes a lot of skill to drive around in a circle, but for me, I find it absolutely boring. True, there are other kinds of racing games out there, but the fact remains, all you're doing is driving, whether it's in a circle, straight, or whatever the case may be. However, in the case of F-Zero, it's significantly different.
Now, seeing as how this is supposed to be a review of a game, we might as well take a look at F-Zero. So fire up your SNES 9X emulator, grab your PS2 knockoff controller, and let's take a look at F-Zero.
F-Zero is one of those games that is a paradigm game, but more so than, say, Doom or Mario 64. With those two games, the graphics and gameplay are indeed dated. But here, that is not the case. The graphics still look good some 19 years hence, and to me, they really have not aged at all. And there are all kinds of little details everywhere. In fact, if you look here, you can see Captain Falcon's head moving whenever you turn. F-Zero was actually one of the very first games to really give you a feeling of speed, and this has continued on throughout the rest of the series. The game itself is very, very fast. You really feel like you're going 400 kilometers per hour. The sense of speed is also helped out greatly by the soundtrack. I mean, really, if this is not the greatest soundtrack of all time, then it's at least in the top 5. Just listen to this.
Just remember, if you live in a high-traffic area, do not try and listen to the F-Zero soundtrack while driving.
Oh, come on, you bloody slow-moving idiot! Get out of my way! Come on, the speed limit is 30! What is your problem? Why can't you go faster than 10 miles an hour? Move it!
The gameplay, graphics, and sound all balance to one another, and really work to create an environment where you get sucked into the game. You may have crashed 8 times and had to replay the same track 20 times, but you still are there, rocking out to the soundtrack and hurling profanities at the TV while you try in vain to win the lap. This game has a fairly small selection of only 4 cars, but in all reality, you're really only going to select the bloody Batmobile. Really, if you have a selection of cars, you're not going to pick a Prius, you're not going to pick a Smart, and you are certainly not going to pick a Peel. You're going to pick the damned Batmobile.
Now that car, of course, is not the Batmobile. Rather, it is the Blue Falcon, driven by Captain Falcon, the character that would later become the mascot for the entire F-Zero series. Now, the character himself was first introduced in an 8-page comic that was printed in the back of the game manual.
The comic was called F-Zero, The Story of Captain Falcon, and served to show just how much of a badass he really was. The comic details one of his bounty hunting missions. Yeah, he is a race car driver in addition to a bounty hunter. The bastard just oozes manliness. The comic also introduces the different racers in the game as well. You have Samurai Goro, who is a rival bounty hunter and drives the red hover car. He usually comes in last in the game. Then you have Dr. Stewart, a pompous drone that drives the yellow hover car. He is usually your toughest opponent. Then you have this foul Xeno that drives the green car, and he is your second toughest opponent.
For an 8-page comic, it's really quite good. It's fairly entertaining, it introduces all the characters and sets the stage for the game. Really, it's sort of like a teaser trailer more than anything else. And I do recommend giving it a read.
There is no easy mode. Rather, you have different leagues. You have the Knight, the Queen, and the King, with the Knight League being the easiest, but still not easy. In the end, you basically have hard, harder, and finally you better be bloody well insane, or a masochist to even attempt. A fairly oddly named difficulty setting if ever there was one. If you have never played a racing game before, don't even think about trying any of the other difficulties until you have beaten the entire Knight League. If you have not played this game in a few weeks, you'd better start with the bloody Knight League, because I will tell you this, the Queen and the King will kick you in the fundament so hard you won't be able to sit down for a week. Although I may be exaggerating on that, but it certainly feels that way. So here is the track Mute City 1, which is by far the easiest track in the game. Still, it's pretty bloody hard if you've never played it before. The controls for this game are fairly basic. You move left and right with the D-pad and drift with the shoulder buttons. An easy control scheme, but putting it into practice is something else entirely. You have only 4 opposing racers, and each track consists of 5 laps. And it is every bit as long as it sounds. There will be tracks where you will barely be able to get through lap 1, only to know in the back of your mind that you are going to have to do it 4 more times. Also, you can be going along in first place for the first 4 laps, and screw up on the 5th lap, and lose the entire race. Luckily, though, you do have a few lives and a few continues, so at least if you do make a mistake, you don't have to start all the way back at the first race. But I do recommend emulating it because those save states do go a long way towards evening up the odds. The tracks themselves are quite varied and very difficult. This game requires fraction of a second reflexes, and a fairly sound memory, because in later tracks there are going to be constant sharp turns and various obstacles. You see, by about the 3rd or 4th lap, other cars start to appear on the track. They are there to knock you off course, and some will explode if you hit them. In addition to that, you can take damage by hitting the wall. Now, if you take too much damage, your car will explode.
Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jewish God! Help me, Allah! Ah! Help me, Tom Cruise! Tom Cruise using witchcraft on me to get the fire off me!
You can also die in other ways as well. If as you jump ramps don't hit the track and fall in this middle area, you explode as well. This track here is on the Queen circuit. It is especially difficult. You see, if you don't hit these ramps just right, you are going to die. The Queen circuit is actually where I have gotten stymied. It's at Whiteland 2. Getting through the track to this point has been difficult, but getting past this point has proven damn near impossible.
Don't you get it? You don't drive with your eyes, you drive with your heart.
This is just dumb. I can't see a thing.
You gotta feel the road. You gotta let it live inside you.
He's right. I must drive with my heart. I must let go of my conscious self and act on instinct. worse! That didn't work at all!
You know what? Screw it. Let's look at the first track of the Insane or Masochistic League. Mute City 3 is not nearly as hard as one would think. Rather, it is only 3 times as hard as Mute City. You have sharp turns, and sharp turns with landmines. But at least, no jumping. So the track is winnable. Like with any successful game, F-Zero would garner a large number of sequels, and the character of Captain Falcon would later be seen in the Super Smash Bros. Series. If there's one thing to be said about this series, is that it is consistent. That is, it's consistently awesome. F-Zero X, while not being as graphically complex as other racers on the N64, managed to feel just as fast as its predecessor. There were also a number of F-Zero handheld titles as well. Personally, the only one I like is the rather humorously named F-Zero Climax. Unfortunately, this game was only released in Japan. Although, I fail to see the point as everything is in English, sans a few things here and there. The game itself is able to capture the full essence of the SNES F-Zero. In addition to that, you also get a track editor. Yeah. This game wouldn't have sold at all. Who would want a game that's this fast and has a track editor? A stupid decision if ever there was one. Really, as far as F-Zero sequels go, this one has to be my personal favorite, mainly because it's like playing a portable version of the original. Talking about a portable version of the original, you can emulate the first F-Zero using Simul DS. It emulates fairly well with very few graphical glitches. The sound will glitch now and again, but it's not all that noticeable. There's also a layering issue with the difficulty selection screen, as you can't actually see it. However, you can see the arrow, and since there are only 3 difficulties, it's not that hard to figure out. As for the game itself, you can see everything, and the controls are fairly responsive. Overall, the game is a lot of fun to play on the go, and is, of course, the best racer on the system.
And so that is F-Zero, a game that really breaks down barriers, so to speak. I hate racing games, and yet I really love the F-Zero franchise, and I do recommend giving the first game a download, because really, it's a game apart from the rest of the racing game genre. Now, if you find that you really, really like the game, you might try to hunt down the cartridge, but then it's only just to add to your personal collection.